kept it a secret for years. But about 3 years ago, my family finally found out that my younger brother and I are atheists. It was a shock to the Mennonite church that we grew up in. It was even a shock to me at first. When I was in 9th grade, I became increasingly interested in science. Astronomy was the first thing that made me doubt the 6,000-year history as outlined in the Bible. I read that we can observe events happening in galaxies not thousands but millions of light years away. My teachers told me that the light that we see from distant stars was created at the same time as the stars themselves. But a supernova, which marks the death of a star, if it's more than 6,000 light years away, that means that the star wasn't even there 6,000 years ago to be created. The spiral shape of the Milky Way appears to be shaped by gravity. But the distance that the sun travels in 6,000 years isn't even perceptible on the scale of a galaxy. I didn't know very much about geology, but from what I did know, it didn't fit with the global flood that I was taught about. Physics, astrophysics in particular, was what finally convinced me that when it comes to explaining why things are the way they are, I would never accept the explanation of a creator God. I was usually careful about trying to fit science into my biblical worldview, but when I was reading the last chapter of a book by Stephen Hawking, I realized that I'm an atheist. It was a terrifying thought. It would mean a lot of changes for someone who grew up as a Mennonite. And I wasn't ready to make those changes. Nobody knew that I was an atheist, and I decided to keep it that way. And I kept going to church, to street meetings and prison services. I even handed out religious literature when that was expected of me. But I gradually became less careful about hiding my secret. My parents found a book with atheism written in 2-inch high font on the front cover. And I watched DVDs that were putting religion in a negative light with my brothers there. What finally let out the secret was when my older brother found a profile on my phone that said that I was an atheist. My mom didn't believe it at first. She thought it was the result of some deep pain or guilt that was causing me to backlash. But I had to explain it's not how I feel, it's just what I believe is true. We went to the Creation Museum in Kentucky, which gives a literal interpretation of the book of Genesis, but it wasn't very convincing because I had read most of the arguments before. On the way home, my older brother was explaining what all problems he expects me to face as an atheist, but my younger brother seemed supportive of me. The ministry at church found out when my parents went to some of their friends and asked what to do. So I had some awkward meetings with the ministry. At the second meeting, I noticed my younger brother pacing the hall before the meeting, so I asked if he wants to come along, and he did. And at the meeting, he said that he's an atheist too. Well, that was a tragedy. And we were at church the day it was announced that Jonathan and Anthony Good claimed to no longer believe in God. And everybody was very somber after the service. And some of them told me that they would be praying for me. And I was partly blamed for Anthony's becoming an atheist, especially after I took him to an atheist conference in Philadelphia that fall. So he was sent off to live with a family in Vermont, and then he went to live with some of our cousins in Wisconsin for the winter. And when he came home, I was sent to live with one of my aunts. I lived there for a while and then moved into an apartment by myself. At the apartment, I had to focus very hard to balance work and school, and after a while it seemed like atheism was no longer my defining characteristic, so I was allowed to come back home this month. So here I am. It was a hard journey to make, but I believe I have a better relationship with my family again. There's an anonymous saying, "A bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the turn."